Your Excellency, distinguished guests and fellow colleagues, welcome to today's CLC lecture series. My name is Alisa and I'm from the Center for Liveable Cities. The center was jointly established by the Ministry of National Development and the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources in 2008 to distill, create, and share knowledge on livable and sustainable cities. The CLC lecture series is one of the platforms through which urban thought leaders share best practices and exchange ideas and experiences. Today's lecture is part of the CLC Urban Pioneer Lecture Series, where we hope to share Singapore's urban development expertise experience over the last 40 to 50 years. In today's session, we are honored to have with us Dr. Ngiam Tong Tau, Chairman of Sky Urban Solutions and former Chief Executive Officer of Agri-Food and Veterinary Authority. Dr. Ngiam Tong Tau, who has actively promoted the farming sector for the past 40 years, will share his observations on the rapid changes in the farming industry and the resilience and entrepreneurship of our farmers in meeting the challenges of farming in land-scarce Singapore. He will also share his vision on the way forward for the farming sector. The presentation will be followed by a moderated panel discussion and a Q&A session with the audience, which will be moderated by Dr. Paul Teng, who is an adjunct senior fellow of food security in the Center of Non-Traditional Security Studies at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in the Nanyang Technological University. With this, let us begin the session. Let me invite Dr. Ngiam to stage. Dr. Ngiam, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you on sustaining Singapore's farming heritage. I would like to show you that despite having little land for farming, we do have a thriving farming community. However, in recent years, we have seen a decline in the amount of land for farming, which threatens the viability of our farming industry. I would like to show you how our pioneer farmers have managed to develop successful and economically viable farming ventures in the very challenging environment for farming in Singapore. We have seen the modernizing of Singapore farms in the last 50 years. Our farms have come of age and should be sustained for the next 50 years. I would like to share with you some ideas on how we can achieve this. Let me start by showing you this series of pictures of farming in Singapore in the 1900s. From the 19th century and up until the 1950s, our rural people practiced subsistence farming. Often the farms are mixed farms growing vegetables, sweet potatoes, tapioca, yam, chicken, ducks and pigs, and some fish in the ponds. There were also coconut and rubber plantations. Small rambutan and durian plantations were also kept. Other fruits such as soursop, jambu, chiku, mangosteen were also cultivated in small holdings. Surprising enough, there were also farms cultivating tobacco. This slide here shows you Singapore in the old days. I think many of us knew that Orchard Road was once an orchard. And there were Chinese farmers since the 1900s. And look at the farming family. I think those of us who are older can identify with such a scene. The vegetable farms, which were the easiest to farm vegetables. The farmers did a lot of it. We even had chicken farms where the chicken were free-ranging. cattle farms, egg farms. The bigger egg farms are housed and eggs are collected manually. Pigs of various breeds, slow-growing Chinese breeds. And the picture on the right, maybe some of the younger people will not be familiar with. That's how we transported pigs in the old days. They were put in cages and they put behind a bicycle and they bring them to the slaughterhouse. Feeding of ducks out in the open, the enclosed duck farm. And for fish, there were many kelongs in the sea, but they have all been removed now. Oops. I can identify with this scenario as I grew up in the rural area of Upper Serangoon in the 1940s and 1950s, where many people grew some food in their backyards. My family shared a house with 3 other families. At the back of our house was a coconut plantation with some empty land. We cultivated sweet potatoes, tapioca, and yam in these empty lands. I remember collecting our urine in pots to be used as fertilizers for these crops. There were also a few fruit trees, such as guava, jambus, buah rambai, and a couple of durian trees in our backyard. It was a great joy climbing up these fruit trees to harvest the fruits. One advice I can give you is that the guava tree has very supple branches. It won't break. But if you climb a jambu tree, the branches break easily. I have fallen off a jambu tree once. And of course, for durians, you wait for the durians to drop. You don't have to harvest them. My mother also kept a flock of some 30 to 40 hens for meat and eggs. We also kept 2 to 3 pigs a year to be fattened and sold at Chinese New Year. We collected food waste from the neighborhood and cooked them as swill for feeding the pigs. The other families did the same. There were other smallholder pig, poultry, and duck farms in the neighborhood. Pig farms kept about 200 pigs each, and duck and poultry farms kept about 1,000 to 2,000 birds. Small herds of cattle and goats are also kept. This idyllic existence in the rural areas ended in the 1960s, when the government decided to resettle and clear the rural areas of squatters and farmers. The rural land was cleared to protect water catchment areas and to give way for development for public housing, estates, industrial estates, roads, and other public facilities. Over a decade, from 1975 to 1984, the farm holding area fell from 15,000 hectares to 5,800 hectares. The number of farms fell from 15,600 to 7,900 farms. It was quite a massive resettlement exercise, but the squatters and farmers and the farmers with farm license were compensated. Most of the farmers were rehoused in our HDB estates. Special attention was given to pig farms in the rural areas because the pig farms were known to contaminate the water source. This slide shows you one of the farms which was developed in the Punggol area and the Jalan Kayu area. They were shifted from the Lim Chu Kang area and they went over to farm in Punggol. This is Tan Chai Huat Farm, one of the biggest farms at that time in Singapore, pig farms. And the picture you see, with the man in the white check shirt, is Mr. Tan Hong Koon. He is now the chairman of the Prime Group, which runs the Prime supermarkets. And because he could not farm pigs in Singapore, he went over to China to farm pigs. And he has successfully developed a pig farm in China. He also owns 6 golf courses in China and some organic vegetable farms. Our farm at that time attracted quite a lot of attention internationally, and this gentleman on the right is a visitor from FAO. And we had visitors from ASEAN countries, and we showed them the new way of farming pigs and extended our knowledge to our neighboring countries. The pig farms which were removed from the other catchment areas were all resettled in Punggol and Jalan Kayu. This is where our Punggol new estate is, our Sengkang new estate is. We very successfully developed large pig farms in these areas. This picture shows you the Punggol Phase 3 commercial farms, which consist of 12 huge farms having 20,000 to 30,000 pigs. And we did a lot of research on treatment of waste, animal waste. And the animal waste program was headed by Professor Paul Tiganidis under the UNDP FAO project, which was in Singapore in the 1970s and 1980s. New breeds of pigs were brought in, were introduced. However, in 1984, the government decided to phase out pig farming from Singapore. Basically, to acquire land for housing and also to prevent smells coming out of the pig farms which were disturbing the surrounding housing areas. And by 1989, all the pig farms were phased out. However, as usual, all the pig farms were compensated and they moved out of the land. This is just to show you that these are the farmlands in 1960, about 15,000 hectares. 1984, 6,000 hectares, and by 205, the farmlands were 1,500 hectares. In 1984, there was a review of the farming policy in Singapore because we knew then that if we did not provide land for farming in Singapore, there will be no more farms in Singapore within 10 years or so. So the EDB and the Primary Production Department at that time put up a scheme to develop agro-technology parks. The agro-technology parks were to produce a measure of our food supply, reducing our reliance on other countries, and also local farm produce serve as a benchmark for safety and quality for imported farm produce. For example, our vegetables can be grown with minimal use of pesticides, and therefore we could require imported vegetables to be free of pesticides or meeting the required MRL. Also, our egg farms can produce eggs free of Salmonella enteritidis, which is a disease, serious disease, which can infect especially young babies and causing them to die. Because of that, the eggs we import from Malaysia must come from accredited Salmonella enteritidis-free farms. The agro-technology parks were designed for modern farming systems, good farm management practices, producing high-quality farm produce, and the lease was for 20 years. You can see here that we had planned the agro-technology parks so that various farming activities are compatible. We could not have a fish farm next to a vegetable farm, because when the vegetable farms use pesticides, the pesticides may drift across into the ponds and kill the fish. And we had a mix of farms, poultry farms, vegetables, fish farms in an agri-tech park. By 2008, there were 233 farms for ornamental fish, food fish, layer, bird, cattle, goat, crocodile, vegetables, fruits, orchids, ornamental plants, aquatic plants, and pets within the agro-technology parks. This slide just shows you that by 2008, there were 228 farms which occupied 703 hectares of land. The farms within the agro-technology parks were successfully developed. There were vegetable farms using modern housing, using protected cultivation houses, netted houses to produce quality and safe vegetables. The egg sector intensified the use, they automated, and they could produce high quality and safe eggs. Ornamental fish sector. There were many ornamental fish farms, and Singapore is known as the ornamental fish capital of the world. We are famous for our guppies, which you can see in some pictures there, and also the arowana, the dragonfish. Singapore is very efficient in exporting ornamental fish because we are a logistics hub. And the AVA had done research and extended the knowledge to the farmer to make sure that they can transport this fish to other countries with low mortality rates, right? Healthy fish. Because Singapore is a transport hub, logistics hub, much of the ornamental fish was brought in from overseas and are conditioned in our farms. And if you should visit Chen Hu Farm, which is the leading ornamental fish farm in Singapore, you could see the operations there. The dragonfish is interesting because we could export the dragonfish from our farms because we got our farms accredited by CITES. To get accreditation from CITES, the government authority, that is the PPD or AVA, will have to certify that the fish that are sold are from the second generation. And we have put that scheme in place, and that actually allowed Singapore farms to export dragonfish. And we were the first in Southeast Asia to do that. Ornamental plant sector. Again, Singapore is known as the cut orchid capital of the world. In fact, cut orchids, the trade in cut orchids began from Singapore. And our orchid farmers developed their farms to produce very high quality vegetable orchids and a huge variety of them. And one of the technologies that was applied was actually tissue culture, where the farmers could micro-propagate the plants, the orchids, instead of having to germinate them, taking a long process of germinating them before they can be grown. Our orchids are distributed to many countries in the world. And few will know that in the agro-technology parks, we have 6,500 fruit trees of some 20 varieties planted along the side of the roads. In fact, it is a huge ethnobotanical park as well. We planted fruit trees which were fast disappearing from Singapore. There were the jambu, the jambu batu there, milk fruit, barambai, and also the red fruit in the middle there is what we call a miracle fruit. If you take that fruit, the food that you take in thereafter will always taste sweet. So for those people who has a sweet tooth, you can pluck the fruits and eat it, and after that, all your food will taste sweet. So that's why we call it the miracle fruit. It is grown in one of the roads within the agro-technology parks, right? And all these fruits can be harvested by the public as long as they don't destroy the trees. Now, behind all this is PPD and AVA subsequently, where we provided veterinary services, horticultural services, fisheries, and also aid for development. I will leave this at that, because if you want to describe the work of PPD and AVA, it will take another 2 hours. Right? Suffice to know that behind all this farm development was PPD and AVA. This picture shows the old district veterinary station. AVA provided a lot of extension services, did a lot of research in our Pig and Poultry Research and Training Institute, supported by the UNDP FAO program. And under that program, the UNDP sends many experts to Singapore in various fields in agriculture. And I can say that we owe the modernizing of our agriculture, of our farms, to this group of people who came and taught us how to farm in a modern way. AVA also has a central veterinary laboratory which does diagnosis for all the plant diseases, animal diseases, and initiate programs to control these diseases. And of course, AVA has the Agri-Biopark in Lim Chu Kang, where the most up-to-date laboratories in agriculture, animal health, veterinary public health, post-harvest technology is situated. Now let me turn to the fish farms. In the 1960s, there were many kelongs in our sea, but we also decided to phase out the kelongs because the kelongs is a very wasteful way of harvesting fish. The kelongs take out fish young and old, and it is bad for the ecosystem. So we phased them out and replaced them with floating net cage farms, which you see in the picture there. The AVA also developed the Marine Aquaculture Center, which provides research and also experimented on various ways of farming the fish and extended these technologies to the farmers. We brought in and bred new species of fish for the farmers to farm. For example, the pompano and cobia fish. And they were farmed in larger net cages called polar circles. MEC also produces quality fish fingerlings for distribution to the farms and introduce new types of fish, especially pompano, the snapper, the golden trevally, for the farmers to farm. So we find that currently there are many farming families which have sustained farming in Singapore despite having to relocate up to 4 times in the last 40 years. Our farmers have successfully developed diverse farms over the last 30 years, despite many challenges such as land tenure and competition from imports, especially for our food farms. Our farms have modernized and have come of age. They are ready to further expand if given the opportunity. Let me share with you the journey of the development of 6 of the successful farms so that we can appreciate what is needed to sustain them for the long term. I would like to start off with Seng Choon Farm. Mr. Koh Swee Lai is here, our Seng Choon founder of Seng Choon Farm, and he comes from the Koh family. The Koh family had a transport business for animal feed and a mill to grind maize, as well as a small pig farm in the Yio Chu Kang area in the 1970s. Seng Choon Farm was established in 1987 in the Sungai Tengah Agri-tech Park as the first fully automated high-tech poultry farm in Southeast Asia. The initial $7 million investment to set up the farm with its own chicken rearing, feed mill, and egg packing facilities was partly financed by a loan at low interest rates under the EDB scheme. This is something that we have to take note that for farmers to develop high-tech farms, they may need to take loans. And EDB at that time is very enlightened, and they had a scheme to give soft loans to the farmers. Seng Choon broke away from the traditional farming methods and used automation and improved the feed for the hens to get better quality eggs. They bucked the trend to sell eggs through wholesalers and set up its own delivery team to ensure quality from farm to table. The farm invested heavily on advertisement and promotions to market its eggs. Now, the Seng Choon brand is a household name. In 1999, Seng Choon began to convert its 2-tiered cages in open houses to multi-tiered cage systems that is about 6 to 8 tiers high in environment control enclosed houses with cool air tunnel ventilation. However, as more housing developed near the Sungai Tengah Agri-tech Park, complaints of odor from the farms in the area increased. In 2002, 3 poultry farms chose to close down with ex gratia compensation. Seng Choon chose to stay and invested in odor reduction systems. After much consideration, Seng Choon relocated to its current 12-hectare site in Lim Chu Kang as it managed to get a 30 years lease for land, and it will also be further away from housing developments. At the moment, the farm produces 150 million eggs per annum. It is undergoing expansion with the potential to increase its flock size to 1 million birds and a production of 250 million eggs per annum within the next few years. Seng Choon has also developed a modern poultry waste treatment plant which produces biogas which is converted to electricity. It also reduces the smell coming out of the farms. The electricity produced is enough to supply the farm's needs, and the excess electricity is sold to the national grid. This development is subsidized by a grant from AVA. Seng Choon Farm shows us that with relevant incentives such as soft loans under the EDB scheme, extension of the farm lease to 30 years, and subsidy for the development of the waste treatment plant has helped to develop and sustain the farm. The vision, business acumen, and tenacity of the chairman, Mr. Koh Swee Lai, has driven the development of the farm despite at times seemingly insurmountable challenges. And I'm glad to say there is also a succession plan. His son Yao Kun is now CEO of the farm, and his daughter Chen Peng is the farm manager. Let me show you some pictures of Seng Choon Farm. There are many visitors to Seng Choon Farm, and we are very pleased that President Wee made the visit. President Wee, when he was our president, would bring the diplomatic corps to visit the farms, the Singapore farms, every year, right? And they visited Seng Choon Farm. Dr. Richard Hu, who was supportive of the Agri-tech parks, also visited Seng Choon Farm. And recently, our senior ministers Maliki and Lee and Mr. Lee and CEO AVA also visited the farm. So I would say that Seng Choon Farm is a model farm for Singapore. And we should try to find out what are the success factors that the government has provided to help Seng Choon develop and expand their farm. Seng Choon is now also bringing in new hen cages to give group housing for laying hens, and which is a trend in Europe at the moment. They have a lot of automation, auto-loading and packaging machines, 22-lane egg grading and packing machine, feed conveyor, there's no more fish, they don't have to use feed trucks. And this is the waste treatment plant, which produces biogas. Let me now turn to the vegetable farm, Kok Fa Farm, Kok Fa Vegetable Farm. Kok Fa Technology Farm is a well-established farm that does soil cultivation of leafy vegetables under protected netting shades. It consists of 5 farms ranging from 0.9 to 2.6 hectares with a total land area of 7.8 hectares. The farm opened in 1992 and produces about 1,400 tons of vegetables annually. It has a cold room, processing and packaging facilities, and overhead mist sprinkler system. Kok Fa specializes in soil cultivation of green leafy vegetables and the production of seedlings for transplanting. He also has expertise in the construction of netted greenhouses. In fact, he helped the team, the AVA team, which went to Pekanbaru to help Indonesian farmers set up netted green vegetable netted farms for the farmers in Indonesia to produce quality and safe vegetables for the Singapore market. Kok Fa vegetables are mainly sold under the Pasar brand in NTUC FairPrice supermarkets. The access to this market has helped him to expand his business in the initial years. Kok Fa had also to nurture the soil for vegetable cultivation, as our soil has very little topsoil. It takes almost 3 years to nurture the soil for optimum cultivation. Therefore, we see here a farmer successfully cultivating and producing vegetables, all the time improving, doing R&D, and learning new technologies. This is a rain shelter, vegetable packing machine. Now, let me turn to a surprising farm in Singapore, the Long Kuan Hong Crocodile Farm. I do not know how many people know that we have a crocodile farm in Singapore. This farm was founded by Mr. Lee Kuan. I think Mr. Lee is here. Yeah. His whole family is here. At 25 years old, Mr. Lee Kuan started out a backyard crocodile farm in 1964 in his mother's beetle leaf farm in what is now Seletar Hills. He started importing baby crocodiles from Indonesia for rearing. In mid-1980s, the family sold the farm in Seletar Hills. Mr. Lee then relocated his crocodiles to Jalan Kayu, where he took over a fish farm. He also rented 2 locations in Lim Chu Kang to house his crocodile breeders. Crocodile breeders are very valuable because the crocodiles start to lay eggs only when they are 12 years old. So you've got to keep them for 12 years. And they are very treasured by the farmer. Long Kuan Hong Crocodile Farm Private Limited was established in 1977 to produce Crocodilus porosus, which is an endangered species, highly prized around the world for its beautiful skin and delicious meat. Mr. Lee successfully tendered for 2 plots of land in the Lim Chu Kang Agri-tech Park. Thousands of crocodiles, ranging from baby crocodiles to breeders, were transferred to the site in 1994. Currently, the farm houses 14,000 crocodiles of various ages. And you may know that the crocodile skins are sent to a tannery which is now owned by Louis Vuitton. And you see all the beautiful crocodile bags around. Some of them may have come from our Long Hong Kuan crocodile farm. The farm obtained accreditation from CITES. This is an important fact for the rearing of Crocodilus porosus with the help of AVA. It was the first crocodile farm in Southeast Asia to obtain CITES accreditation. With this accreditation, the farm could sell and trade the second generation crocodiles produced in the farm. This was crucial for sustaining the farm. The farm helps to increase and maintain the population of this endangered species. It has put Singapore on the map for the conservation of crocodiles. When the crocodiles were moved to the farm in 1994, it took the breeders many years to adjust and settle down in their new environment. The female crocodiles lay eggs only once a year. In the initial 6 to 7 years, the number of eggs laid and the fertility of the egg was very low. Crocodiles start to breed only after 12 years of age. It was only in 2001 to 2002 that the female crocodiles acclimatized to the environment and produced more fertile eggs which hatch into healthy baby crocodiles. After hatching, the crocodiles takes another 5 to 7 years before they can be harvested and marketed. The farm carried out many trials to design the environment and housing for the crocodiles. Mr. Lee had to carry out much R&D on the rearing of crocodiles. He also successfully designed an incubator room to hatch the eggs of the crocodiles. The incubation period is 3 months. After 23 years, all the hard work and dedication towards the farm is just slowly bearing fruits. As the development of the crocodile farm takes a long time and is capital intensive, Mr. Lee actually had to sell 2 of his coffee shops and a condominium to finance the development of the farm. He looks forward to a longer lease of the land to 30 years plus 30 years for him to continue. So we have to appreciate that to set up a crocodile farm, it takes a long while. And if the lease of the land is too short, then it is not worth for the farmer to put more investments into the farm. And again, I'm glad to say, Mr. Lee has also done his succession planning. His son Robin is now the manager of the farm. I'll show you some pictures of the farm. That's Mr. Lee and Robin. A recent group photograph. Mrs. Lee is at the back there, and Mr. Yap Boon Chak. The crocodile ponds, crocodile pens, and the incubation room. It takes 3 months to incubate before the crocodile can hatch. And this is a new hatchling. And if you see a new hatchling, you think that they are harmless, but the moment they are born, they start to bite you. Yeah. And the farm also has an AVA accredited crocodile slaughterhouse, and where they take the skins, salt the skins, and they sell the crocodile meat to the marketplace. Now let me turn to hay dairies. Oh, it's not here. Hay dairies is the only goat farm in Singapore. It has a very long history. In 1920, Mr. He Yak Tang came to Singapore at the age of 16 to be a teacher. He later became a clerk for a hatchery and later started his own hatchery. Subsequently, he bought a 16-acre plantation in Punggol and started Yak Seng Hay Farm to rear ducks, chickens, and pigs. By 1970, he decided to switch to pig farming. Breeder pigs were imported from the US, and as the farm expanded, 8 of his 11 sons helped in the operations of the farm. In the next 10 years, Hay Farm kept 20,000 pigs and became one of the biggest farms in Singapore. In fact, Hay Farm was the first to have a double-story pig farm, 2 layers, right? They were the first to go vertical. When pig farming was phased out from 1984, Hay's farm decided to go into goat farming. Goats were imported from the US with the help of AVA, and after a few years, the project was deemed as viable, and Hay Dairies obtained a 20-year lease in Lim Chu Kang Agri-tech Park in 1993 to farm meat and milking goats. The farm became fully operational in 1997. For the first 5 years, business was relatively slow, and marketing efforts include educational tours to acquaint the public on the qualities of goat milk. Demand slowly increased, and the pasteurizing machine was upgraded to a higher capacity of 1,000 liters per hour to cater to 1,000 goats on the farm. The farm also started online order of the milk, and the milk was delivered in 6 chiller delivery trucks to 70 to 80% of the residential areas in Singapore. The farm increased its goat population to 1,500 goats to meet increasing demands. However, the farm is apprehensive in expanding further due to the uncertainty of the farm lease. They are one of the farms which has been asked to close down by 2017 because the government has acquired the land, a large swath of land in Agri-technology Park. The farm hopes that it can remain at its present site, and if this is not possible, to be allocated another site to carry on its business. So we see here a farm which has taken 20 years to develop and producing good goat's milk for the public. Goat's milk is good for asthmatic children, for children who are allergic to cow's milk, and they are freshly produced in Singapore. And this is a farm which I feel that we should not lose. The farms attracted many school children for visits during the weekends. And you can see in one of the pictures, Mr. Hay, John Hay, I don't know whether he's here, milking the goats. John. Right? So I have known John's family for a long, long time, since the Pongo days. Yeah? And I'm really glad that you have managed to successfully develop this goat farm. Right? And I hope that you'll be allowed to continue. Now, I'd like to turn to a small farm, Ho Wan Fish Farm, belonging to Mr. and Mrs. Ho Soon. These fish farms are one of the many that we have in Singapore growing ornamental fish. Of course, Chen Hu ornamental fish farm is more famous, but there are a few others who are doing very well in our agro-technology park, producing ornamental fish to support the ornamental fish trade. They have ponds there, and they also produce dragonfish. And the day I visited, actually quite recently, the AVA was there to check the identity of the dragonfish, because every dragonfish has a microchip with its identity number. And it is only the second generation dragonfish which can be sold internationally. Right? And they just pack the fish in the box and it is air flown to the destination. Right? Now, Jurong Frog Farm is another interesting farm that we have, supplying frog meat to Singapore. You will see that it's very popular. You go to Geylang, you eat the fish, the frog porridge and so on. Very popular dish, right? And we farm them in Singapore, fresh. The owner of the farm is Mr. Wan Bok Tiao. Mr. Wan Bok Tiao started supplying frogs to the market in the 1970s. Foreseeing the potential of American bullfrogs as a business and an alternative food source, he started Jurong Frog Farm in Old Jurong Road in 1981. The farm moved to a 1.2 hectare lease site in the Lim Chu Kang Agri-tech Park in 1994. The farm breeds and grows the American bullfrog, which produces delicious frog meat. The oviducts are processed into hashima. The farm is also a tourist destination, much due to the effort of Mr. Wan's daughter, Chelsea, who took over the role as a second-generation frog farmer. It has also obtained ISO 2000 certification. And again, this farm is affected by resettlement and hopes to be allowed to remain at its current site. If this is not possible, it hopes to be allocated a new site to continue its business. There are some pictures of children enjoying the frogs. They visit to see the frogs, and you can see this child is really fascinated by the frog. Now let me turn to Toh orchids. Mr. Toh is here. Yeah, I think I saw him somewhere. He's at the back there. Okay, Mr. Toh. The Toh family has been farming from the 1960s. The family had a mixed farm in the Boon Lay area. Pigs, chicken, fruits and vegetables were grown. When the land was acquired by the government for the Jurong Industrial Park, I suppose, the farm was moved to a TOL farm in Choa Chu Kang. The farm continued with chicken farming and also started farming orchids. When demand for orchids grew, the farm converted to orchid farming. This farm was also acquired through the government's resettlement program, and it is now relocated to Sungai Tengah Agri-tech Park in 20 years. So in the span of 40 years, the farm had to move 3 to 4 times. Toh Orchids is a leading orchid farmer in Singapore and exports 30 varieties of cut orchids in Singapore. The company has expanded to another 2 farms, totaling 9.8 hectares, with one farm specializing in orchid production and the other in ornamental plant production. The farm has a well-established marketing and distribution network that enables them to deliver fresh-cut orchids overseas within 24 hours. It is the leading farm which helped Singapore maintain its status as a major orchid exporter in the world. The quality of the orchids is ensured through stringent selection of new hybrids and micro-propagation in the farm's specialized tissue culture laboratory. Tau orchid is also ISO certified and is also certified by AVA under the Assurance Certification Scheme. The farm has also participated in international flower shows and trade exhibitions and has won many awards. These are some pictures. This is Mr. Tau and his son, Wilson, and the whole Tau family. Right? Mr. Tau, and then I think his brother is also running the ornamental plant farm. The orchids in bloom there. In summary, these 6 farms represent the various farming sectors in Singapore. There are many other farms which have also been successfully developed in the last 40 years. For example, Chen Hu Ornamental Fish Farm, Chew Brothers Egg Farm, N&N Egg Farm, O Chin Huat Hydroponic Farm, Lien Hua Hang Quail Farm, to name but a few. They have all shared with me that land tenure is of major concern to them. Uncertainty in the land tenure has hampered their development and has prevented them from further expansion and improvement. Now, let me take you to recent innovations in farming. I'd like to share with you Sky Green's vertical vegetable farm. Right now, we would like to say that we are farming in the third dimension, creating farming space in the air. And Jack is here. Yeah. Jack Ng is the founder of the farm, the designer of the system, and he has developed Sky Green's farm in Lim Chu Kang. The farm is very efficient. It can produce up to 10 times more vegetables than a conventional farm with soil cultivation. The whole system is a A-frame rotating tower powered by a hydraulic system. And the operation cost is very low, and we have streamlined operations to make sure that we cut down on manpower costs. The key economics, 10 times more production. The farm only used 12 liters of water to produce 1 kg of vegetable. In normal soil cultivation, you use much more water. And the electricity cost is only 5 cents per kilogram of vegetables. We use less manpower, and the inputs is reduced. And we only have 75%, reduced by 75%. This farm has won the Index Award, the latest design award in the world, given out by the Danish government. And it recognizes that Singapore farmers are able to innovate, able to design the system which actually can be sold overseas. For example, Sky Greens has expanded to Hainan in China, and they have successfully developed this vertical farm using the Sky Green vertical farming system. Now, there's a lot of discussion on farming in the city, and I'm glad to see there's a lot of activity in this area. The Sky Green system has also been designed for rooftop garden farming. And it can green the urban environment. This is Comco in Scape. It's a young rooftop farmer doing rooftop farming. Community farms sprouting in Singapore in many places in the city. Sky Greens has also proposed to have structures on the facade of the buildings to produce vegetables. We have seen the greening of walls in Singapore, but we could use these walls to produce vegetables, and they can be what we call edible gardens. Sky Greens has also proposed the development of an agro-technology hub. The hub will integrate the whole vegetable business from growing to packing to distribution and for shared labor. And on a more ambitious level, Sky Greens has proposed the development of Agri-Polis. Agri-Polis is a combination of our vertical towers in greenhouses and vertical towers in indoor farming. And on 20 hectares of land, we foresee that we could produce 30,000 tons of leafy vegetables, or over 30% of Singapore's national needs for leafy greens. Indoor farming is coming on in vogue. This is Panasonic indoor farm. You will see the Panasonic vegetables, the salads being sold in Isetan and so on, right? This is highly energy intensive, and you can only grow vegetables which are valuable, of high value. You cannot grow your chai sim, your kailan and all that in such a place. You have to grow microgreens, high value lettuces and so on. And this is what Panasonic does. We also have another farm by ENF Technologies, developed by our local Singaporean. They have a farm in Tagore Lane in an industrial factory in Tagore Lane. And they also use LED lighting and produces very high quality lettuces which are sold directly to the high class restaurants in Singapore. So let's take stock now, the number of farms in Singapore. This is 2014 numbers, and I believe the 2016 numbers will show a further drop in the number of farms and the amount of land that we have. Now, I have tried to paint you the picture of the farming industry in Singapore, and I hope that I've also pointed to you some of the factors that we need to look at to make sure that we put in place to sustain our farms for the next 50 years. 32 years ago, we reviewed the strategy of our farming policy. Arising from the review, the proposal to allocate 6 parcels of land totaling 1,500 hectares to be developed as agro-technology parks to house modern high-tech farms which can maximize the production of the land. The farms in the agro-technology parks provide us with a good measure of our vegetable and egg supply, as well as milk from cows and goats, frog meat, crocodile meats. Farms in the sea also provided a measure of fish for our markets. The farms also generated orchid and ornamental fish production, which enabled Singapore to be recognized as the ornamental fish capital of the world, as well as a leading exporter of quality orchids. However, in recent years, land available for farming has depleted due to planning and land use policies. This is actually due to the policies of our government, land use and planning policies. There's now only about 600 hectares of land left for the farming sector. Last year, I was sad to hear that 62 of the farms in the Lim Chu Kang Agri-tech Park have been informed that they would have to leave the land by 2017. Some of the very successful farms, which I've mentioned, are also affected. Most of the farmers I spoke to expressed that land tenure is their main concern. If the land tenure can be 30 years, they can invest more in the land and adopt new technologies to improve production. The uncertainty of land tenure has left many in a limbo. I've shared with you the development of hay dairies. Mr. John Hay of Hay Dairies is keen to expand production to meet market demand for his goat milk. The uncertainty in his land tenure has deterred him from investing more in the development of the farm. On the other hand, Seng Choon Farm, which has a 30 years lease, has actively invested in expansion, increasing the hen population to 1 million birds and increasing production of eggs from 150 to 250 million per annum. It is time that there is a new review on our farming policy. There is an urgent need to safeguard land for farming. Looking at all the existing farming enterprises and new entrants to farming, we need, in my opinion, to safeguard at least 1,000 hectares of land for farming. In 1984, we safeguarded 1,500 hectares of land for the agro-technology parks. I think it is reasonable to safeguard 1,000 hectares of land for farming, looking at all the farms in Singapore and what do they need, and new entrants into the farming industry. I would like to suggest that a farmers' cooperative be formed to own and manage the safeguarded farmland. Management of the farmland by a cooperative will allow the farmers to decide on the use of the land and to offer longer land leases. This will be a more effective and efficient way for the allocation of land for various farming activities. I'd like to make mention here also of the Kranji Countryside Association. They are an association of 35 farms in the Kranji area, and they have united to make the Kranji area into a park for visitors. And they have attracted a lot of visitors. They organize farmers markets. They have a bus service that brings you from the MRT station to many farms in the area. And you will find many visitors visiting the Agro-Technology Park in Lim Chu Kang, the Kranji area, to visit the farms and learn more about farming in Singapore. Farms which are slated to be relocated but have a proven production record should be retained on site. I would urge our planners to look more closely at the allocation of land for other purposes. Can it not be that some of our farms can coexist in land used for other purposes? I'm sure if you look at it and you plan it well, you could accommodate some of these farms which are already established on the land for the last 20 to 30 years. And we should leave them in situ. If this is not possible, they should be allocated land under the direct land allocation scheme to continue with their farming. And also, I think we should give consideration to proposals to build an agri-hub, an agri-police in the future. And land should be identified and allocated for that. In developing the farms in the safeguarded areas, as in our agro-technology parks, all farms must also meet environmental requirements so as to integrate into the peri-urban and urban areas. And most of all, there must be constant R&D to be carried out by the farms as well as by AVA to improve the productivity of the farms. Ladies and gentlemen, I've shared with you the successful development of our farms. Our farms have come of age and have the necessary experience to improve and expand production. I am of the strong view, that if land tenure can be extended to 30 years, our farms will take off, they will fly. And they will be more willing to invest in technology and expansion of their farms. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ngiam, for not only the very, very insightful lecture, but also helping us get acquainted with our farms in Singapore. Now we will go into the question and answer Q&A time. First, I'd like to invite Professor Paul Teng to please come on stage. Professor Teng will be our moderator today. We have mics. Please put up your hand and a mic runner will come and pass you the mic for your questions. I'd like to hand over now to Professor Teng.
Well, thanks, Elisa. You know, I'm sure you'll all agree with me. There was a fascinating journey back in history, but also a good capture of what Singapore is doing today and capable of doing. I think there were so many learnings, really, from I think, Dr. Ngiam's presentation. You know, to me, the strong entrepreneurial spirit, the tenacity of some of the farmers here, it's just amazing. You know, I travel all the way Asia. Sorry, in fact, I'm one of the few qualified agriculture scientists left in Singapore. Okay? So I do a lot of work in agriculture. But what Dr. Ngiam was also able to do was to give us a glimpse of the future. Okay? Now, I have a lot of questions, in fact, but I think I'm going to defer to the audience. I'm sure all of you will agree with me that it's been a fascinating talk, and you must all have questions. So let somebody break the ice. All right, I'll break the ice. Okay. Hopefully somebody will follow. You know, it's interesting when you look at what's happened in developed countries. You know, as countries industrialize, develop, inevitably, agriculture contributes less and less to gross domestic product. Number of farmers also declines. Okay? And we find that countries like the Netherlands, for example, where I used to live, you know, they have purposeful policies to designate land use. Okay? And farming is not just to produce food. There are very strong arguments to keep farms as part of the landscape. There are aesthetic reasons, there are ethical reasons, recreation reasons. Now, certainly in Singapore, I think we're starting to see the beginning of agri-tainment, as we all know, in the Kranji area. So what I really want to ask you is, you know, how do we make the arguments, you know, to whoever is in charge of planning, that look, you know, there's a multiple purpose for farming, which we need to recognize in Singapore, apart from losing our heritage. Yeah? There's some very strong arguments as to why we need to keep farms in Singapore. So, I'll let you...
I agree with you that other than the production aspects, there's also social aspects, right? I think most of us have an affinity to the soil, to production of food, production of agricultural products, flowers, trees, fruits. And our children are very interested in this. And I did mention to you the KCA, the Kranji Countryside Association, an association of 35 farmers with diverse farming activities. And they have managed over the last few years to create an interest in the Kranji area. And in fact, they were very gratified that our authorities have given them the brown sign to say that Kranji Park is actually a park. Yeah? And within the parks, you have different types of farms for the children to visit, for visitors to visit, and also there are international visitors to come and see us, right? Recently, we were planning for the Commonwealth Royal Agriculture Show conference in November. And when we brought the British agriculture people to Singapore, and we showed them our farms, and they were fascinated, right? And that is why they chose Singapore to be the venue for this conference in November. It should be an interesting conference where people will share about farming. So I would say that farms are not just for producing goods. Farms are for visitors also. It serves a dual purpose. I bring my grandchildren to Western Australia just to visit farms, right? Of course, I visit our own farms here too, but looking at different types of farming systems. And I can tell you that my grandchildren really enjoy such trips, and they look forward to it, right? So we should retain some of our farms which may not be in the mainstream, what we understand is mainstream farming. We have organic farms which produces not much vegetables, but organic vegetables, right? And there are people interested in this. They will go to organic farms to buy organic vegetables. The frog farms, the goat farm, goat milk. I think John has shared with me, he had to really spend many years developing this market in Singapore. But once the people get to drink the goat's milk, they are addicted to it. So they come back for more, right? Right. Okay, thank you.
So let's just have a quick poll of hands. How many of you have not been to the Kranji area? Not been to? All of you have been? I can't believe that. That's very good. Amazing. Yeah. All right, let me ask the question in reverse. How many of you have been to a farmer's market in Singapore? About less than half, no? Well, still a way to go. Okay, that's a good indication that we still have a lot of work to do, really, in a sense. Dr. Ngiam actually was being very modest. He's chairing our local committee to organize the 27th Commonwealth Agriculture Conference in November this year, and it's going to be held in Singapore, and it's the first time ever that this conference is being held in Asia. That's how significant it is. That's our urge those of you who are interested to learn more to sign up. Okay? He's been able to convince a few of us to help him in the organizing committee. so really, credit Dr. Ngiam that this conference is here.
Yeah, Prof. Teng is on the committee.
You convinced me. Okay, I think we see quite a few hands now. Let's start with the lady over there,
okay.
please.
Thank you. Hello, Dr. Ngiam. Thank you so much for your
Can you introduce
story.
yourself?
Yeah. Dr. Teng, my name is Olga Grant. I work with the Netherlands Embassy here in Singapore with the agricultural section. And thank you so much for bringing up the Netherlands. Thank you for a good land use, huge promotion. I'm from the agricultural section. I'm here with my colleague from the innovative section. And together, I think old school farming is no more of this world. It's all the high-tech farming. I have a question and a suggestion. For the hay farm, the goat farm, I understand that your land lease is, coming to an end maybe, unfortunately. In the Netherlands, we have a cow farm built in Rotterdam on the water. It's the first floating cow farm in the world. I don't know if goats get seasick. But maybe if you people will talk to our people, who knows, Singapore can have their first floating goat farm. in the world. It is a suggestion that I would just like to mention. The other question I have is, I watched the video of Channel News Asia about the Jurong FROG farm the other day. I don't know if you've seen it, where the lady was saying, you know, we have to move as well. With what is going on, yeah, I see, I recognize you now. Great video, by the way. And like you said, you cannot eat money, and I agree. I don't know about the power of social media, and maybe the government in Singapore has made their decision about the land lease, but in Australia, Australian farmers are under tremendous stress because the milk that they produce, they have to sell below their cost price. So the power of social media has been so that most people in Australia now have gone for Australian-only brands, where the Australian brands of milk have now been sold out in the supermarket, leaving the cheaper milk there. So people are willing to, you know, buy. So I'm thinking, power of social media, will we still have an impact if we all write in and say, we think that the land lease should be extended for 30 years. We think that Singapore should have their heritage. What is your opinion on that? Will we have an impact as the public, or has a decision been made and cannot la? That's my question.
Thank you very much for your suggestion to have a floating farm. Right? In fact, Sky Greens has designed a floating farm for vegetables. Yeah? And John, you may want to look at it. Yeah? It's a floating farm. Yeah. I think the fact that CLC has given me the opportunity to talk about our farms here, that is to inform the public of the plights our farms are facing. And I'm very sure that if from ground up there is a petition to the government authorities to give consideration to extending the leases up to 30 years, that will be much appreciated.
Chelsea, do you want to say something before? Good.
Actually, I do have one question. Yeah. Hi, I'm Chelsea from Jurong FROG Farm. Just speaking about farming, old school farming being a thing of the past, I just have a question for Dr. Ngiam about, you know, the children that come out to the frog farms for excursion. They want to see the frogs. They want to be in the sun, you know. But there's this whole idea about productivity, about putting frogs in high-rise buildings, in factories, you know. So how much do you think there's an allowance for the government to allow farming to be retained on site as it is, so the children can really experience farms as they are and not in blocks, in buildings? Yeah.
I think this should be addressed to some of the government authorities here. No, I agree with you. In fact, we should farm animals like frogs and all that in their natural environment for people to appreciate it. And I think for frog farms as well as the crocodile farms, for the breeders, they have to be in a very natural environment to breed, right? I know I've done a little research on frog farming in the past, and I know that you need for them to listen to the rain before they lay eggs. That's a natural behavior. And if you put them in a building, will they do that? We don't know. The crocodile farm is the same. The crocodile breeders have to be very comfortable in the environment before they lay their eggs. This, I think, is a maternal instinct of crocodiles. They must know that where they lay the eggs will incubate and hatch, you know. So they are very discerning. And we should look at nature and see that, and emulate nature, right? So if we are forced to go indoors, then we have to pay attention to these factors as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ngiam. I think this gentleman in front. Yeah.
My name is Robert Lee. I would like to ask Dr. Ngiam to share with us his view. We have been talking about local farms and basically to produce food and do R&D. But there was an aspect of the local farms that you touch on about transferring technology to overseas. Now we are in the area of agriculture, food production in the center of ASEAN. Can you share with us your view about local farms developing, doing R&D, developing technology, being a pilot farm, and then going overseas to actually produce food and bring back to Singapore? We have done that a little bit in the past. We have done it in Indonesia, we have done it a bit in Aceh, and also a bit prawn hatchery in Aceh, and also in Laos. But how do you see this as an argument of developing urban, modern farm R&D technologies that we can actually apply and actually supplement our food source from local production by developing such farms overseas? Thank you.
Yes, I think there's a lot of scope for our farms to do R&D, to build pilot farms, to apply the new technology. A case in point actually is Sky Greens, which I'm very closely associated to. Sky Greens have come up with a new farming system, vertical farming system. And we have proposed to build such larger farms in Singapore, but the government is still considering whether they will allocate some land for us to expand our farms. So what we did was, we brought this technology overseas because there was a lot of international interest in this area. People from as far away as Saudi Arabia, China, even New York, somebody came to approach us to buy our systems, right? Malaysia has interest in our systems, and therefore we can actually innovate new farming systems which can be sold overseas. For the Sky Greens case, when we have joint ventures to produce vegetables using our systems in other countries, the idea is to bring it back to Singapore. Some of it should be imported back to Singapore, because we know that if you grow vegetables using our system, then the vegetables will be safe for consumption. Clean, quality, and safe vegetables, right? So there are other aspects like fisheries, right? If you can have intensive fisheries, land-based fisheries, which other countries have done, but not many in this part of the world has done. Land-based aquaculture. In fact, this is one of my pet interests in the past. Yeah? How do we develop intensive land-based aquaculture? Because the coastal seas are being contaminated. The last incidents of algal bloom in Singapore killed much of our fish. And in other countries, the tendency is to bring farming to the coastline on land, where you can control the water quality. Even in Canada, in Vancouver, where they had farms outside, they are closing down the farms, bringing it back on land. In the Mediterranean Sea, in fact, Mr. Loy and I, we went to visit some of the farms, and they all are land-based, because the sea, once it is contaminated, will create disease problems for the farms. So I think one of the areas, Robert, is that we can actually do more research into developing land-based fish farms. And actually, land-based fish farms is a combination of biology and engineering. It is actually basically treatment of the water, recycle of the water, cutting down costs in the pumping of the water and the cleaning of the water. And the biology is the breeding of the fish, right? So I think there is potential in that area. Some of our factory farms, vegetable farms, they have innovated, and they probably can also be extended to other countries who needs some urban city farming.
In fact, one of the reasons I think Singapore was chosen to be the venue for the 27th Commonwealth Conference is mainly because of the interest in urban farming. You know, in a sense, Singapore has become like a microcosm for modern urban farming. And just to set the context, you know, the UN's estimates are that about 20% of the world's food currently comes from the urban, peri-urban area. And there's a lot of interest worldwide to look at how we can actually grow more food in urban areas, not to replace the food from the countryside, but to complement it. Okay? And in the process, also derive the aesthetic, you know, benefits and so on, really, kind of thing. Yeah? But you actually raised another interesting question, which I'm not sure whether anybody else in the audience would care to comment on. And this is the role of Singapore to be an R&D hub, okay, to actually generate value, create value. For example, research on seeds. You know, the big multinational companies don't grow corn or rice. They produce seeds. And that's where the big value capture is. It's all in the genetics. And Singapore prides itself as a major R&D hub. Lots of scientists here. Yeah? So the question that often we have to ask ourselves in Singapore is, where do we play? Okay? Which part of that, basically that chain do we play, really? Unfortunately, we haven't really started doing a lot of that in Singapore. Yeah? I want to move on to another hand. Ladies first. Andrew. Okay.
Actually, Dr. Paul, you gave me a great segue because my question, sorry, my name's Anne. I'm from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, so representing the other side of the world and the farming capital of the world. Actually, you touched on the very question I was going to sort of state, that smart cities and the world is actually looking at the integration of rural and urban sectors and trying to find solutions to that. And by virtue of your location, Singapore is doing that anyway, because they're trying to integrate the farms into an urban situation that is actually a living, breathing R&D lab for what the rest of the world wants to know. Is that not a great push to ask the government to review the agricultural policy? Because we know policy is what sort of stonewalls everything. How do we do that and present that as an option?
How have you done that in New Zealand?
Well, to the Dutch sort of situation, the people talk, you know, but we've only, like you, got 5 million, but it still talks. Yeah.
By the way, I used to live in New Zealand too. Okay, so Andrew, you had a question.
I'm Andrew Powell from Asia Biobusiness here in Singapore. So, Dr. Ngiam, great talk. Really was it very interesting. I totally agree with the comments that we need to support the farming community here to do more R&D, develop technology. But I also agree with Paul in that we have an intellectual capital base in Singapore that is really strong. Not all of these folks that we're training in universities here are going to work in the biomedical science industries. They can work in the life science industries and the plant science industries, and they can really drive Singapore forward and partner with countries around the region. My question, though, is that, Dr. Ngiam, in all this time you've been involved in agriculture in Singapore, even in my time in Singapore, we've seen Singapore grow so much in size, not just in population, but actual geographical size, with so much reclamation. Is there never any discussion in using some of that reclaimed land for agriculture? Or high-tech agriculture?
I'm not aware of that. But I can share with you that the policy for farming has always been that farms can be temporarily housed on land, and they are expected to move when the land is required for other purposes. This is something that I hope the government will change. That is why I'm proposing that we should safeguard 1,000 hectares, which is less than 1% of Singapore's land for our farms. Can it not be done? I think the planners need to really look at it more carefully. Because I've shown you that it is worth our while to retain our farms, because we do have a heritage in farming. Although Singapore, you look at it as a city, is business and banks, manufacturing, electronic goods, but we have a sector in our population who comes from the farming background, and they are providing good services to us, giving us nice vegetables, eggs, making us goat's milk, cow's milk, making us crocodiles, I mustn't forget, and frogs, crocodile skins, and so on, making us the ornamental fish capital of the world, leading exporter of orchids. Can you imagine a small country being recognized for these abilities? So, I do really urge our authorities to relook into our farming policy. Safeguard some land for farming. It is worth it.
The gentleman over there, and then, yeah.
Okay, I'm C.S. Lim from the Media Development Authority. I just want to ask maybe a silly question. No? We have sky green. How about underground green? Grow vegetable underground. There are a lot of abundant mines and coal mine, mineral mines all unused. So you can find a way to understand the photosynthesis process. Then the potential to grow vegetable underground is huge.
I think underground farming is practiced in London itself. You know, they have farms in their disused tunnels, as you say, and they can farm it. It is no different from farming it in a factory in Singapore, the Panasonic, the ENF's type of farms, right? But those are very energy intensive, and you can only farm high value vegetables because it costs so much to produce the vegetables, right?
Just a follow-up. That means there's a potential to convert energy to food. We can't eat, and like the lady say, can't eat energy, but we can eat food, eat vegetables. So
Yes.
there's a means for us to grow. And we can do it. Thundering, we're expert now with all the MRT lines.
But if you can produce cheap energy, fine. You can get solar panels that will do the job for you, you know, wind turbines and things like that, right? If you can have very cheap energy, which I don't believe in the world there's a country with cheap energy now. Yeah.
So if we can do R&D and understand the process of photosynthesis, maybe the plant just need 1 hour sunlight. They don't need 24 hours. So there's a way, if we do more R&D, of growing a plant underground with just 1 hour sunlight. You know?
Yes, I think that is one aspect to look at. I think our scientists have also been looking at it. Do you need a lot of sunlight to grow the plant? If in some papers I read, you only need pulses of light, you know, intermittent light. You don't need continuous lighting, right? So these are the type of research, as you mentioned, that we can encourage, that maybe we can use spaces which is not conventionally used for farming.
Sorry, I can't resist but comment on this. Because I'm in agriculture, and I used to work at the International Rice Research Institute. One of my pet peeves is that if you look at global agricultural research, almost exclusively it's directed at selecting breeding plants to grow outside. Okay? There's been hardly any work done to select, to breed plants that are space limited, light limited, also water limited for that matter. And here's where Singapore's R&D capacity, in fact, can be tapped to do that. It'll be benefiting not just Singapore, but the whole world, actually, itself. Yeah? So that's another area of kind of knowledge, value addition that Singapore can actually do. But I can talk a lot. But anyway, yes, this gentleman over here, please. Oh, sorry, lady first.
Hi, I'm Hui Ying. So I represent a citizen science initiative called Foodscape Collective. Our interest is in home gardens and people who are growing things by themselves. But my question today is more about ground-up innovation, the whole idea of R&D. We've mentioned R&D a few times, and it is true, Singapore is an R&D hub. education and human resources are supposed to be our prime assets. But I have spoken to many people in the farming industry who say that sometimes when they come up with innovations by themselves, this is taken up by the government and it's not credited. So there's this lack of trust amongst or between different sectors. And I feel that that is an obstacle to the kinds of collaboration and partnerships that could evolve. And that you bring up great examples of partnerships that have happened in the past. So I'm wondering, in the future, as we want to support more kinds of innovation from citizens, from people in Singapore, and perhaps even collaborations across region in Singapore and Southeast Asia, what kind of policy measures would be useful for protecting things like IP rights, in a way that doesn't, force citizens who come up with innovations to have to pay extremely high patent fees, in a way that actually supports an interest in trust, in sharing, and not just about R&D for economic sake. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think you bring up the issue of IP. I think that's very important. From the private sector, when we want to do research with the universities, for example, the universities will insist that the university retain the IP. In fact, this has been a deterrence from the private sector doing research with the universities. I think this is something that we have brought up to the NRF and so on, and I think it needs to be addressed. If the private sector does joint research with the universities or with the government institutes, then the IP must be shared. It cannot be just retained by the government. And the government will give you research grants. The research grants is 70% of your cost. But the farm still needs to come up with 30% and provide the facilities for the research. And yet, the farm does not share the IP. This is actually a policy matter which should be looked at. Right? I'm glad that you brought this up. Thank you.
Thank you for answering.
I think the gentleman here.
Hi, Raymond Kwok from Kwok Group LP. I'd like to bring the two gentlemen together, especially Dr. Teng, Paul, because you look after food security. I understand that Singapore is a very small country and we need to develop our ecosystem in an economic, sustainable way. And I think that if we want to go forward to propose sustainable farming, whether it is agri or aqua, we need to have a model whereby it has to be able to build a financial model so that it justifies the alternative use of land. I think if we want to talk to the government to say, can we have 1,000 hectares of land, we need to basically create an economic model. And the only way I can see that if we cannot get the dollar to fit into it, we will need to bring in the food security angle, whereby we need to have some sustainable food in Singapore where we produce, if at all we cannot get import food. So maybe the two gentlemen can share how can we build this ecosystem in an economically sustainable way.
Actually, just now I did mention that we should have a farmers' cooperative, right? And using the cooperative mechanisms, we probably could have a business plan to justify buying the land from the government at market rates, right? And leasing it out to the farmers for various activities. That can be looked at, actually. Yeah? But I agree with you. In the past, we've always been asking the government for land because we wanted food security and so on, which is something quite amorphous, right? In the end, actually, it's the business. It's the farming business. Can the farm operate and be economically viable, right? I agree with you that we should look into that aspect.
I'll give an academic view. Okay? There's always the big picture view, societal good, food security, and so on, you know. Then there's also the individual business case, basically. I think at the macro level, there are other benefits to maintaining a farming sector, which, you know, the resource economists will tell you, the externalities. You can't actually quantify those. Okay? Having green space, you know. And in resource economics, one of the most difficult things to quantify is ecological services. Greening, for example, better air, you know, aesthetics, ethics, even learning values for our children. I think having a farming sector does all that. At the micro level, at the farm level, is the business case. You know, you have to have a strong business case. And that's where you could have enablers provided by the government. I think some of the stuff that Dr. Ngiam talked about, you know. For those who have survived farming in Singapore, there are some success enablers that they've been able to tap into. The question is how much you want to push the frontier, and how much is the government willing to also push the frontiers to maintain that. I mean, I research food security, and Singapore will never be 100% food secure. I mean, we all accept that. Which is why I think AVA's, you know, kind of policies and so on, you know, the 10% import, you know, sorry, 10% of the food here that's grown locally, focusing on the few products. I think that's the right way to go. Yeah, and today, if you talk to food economists, they will tell you it doesn't make sense to be 100% sufficient at all. It doesn't make economic sense. Yeah? And I always tell this story. I was in Korea about 2 months, no, this was 16 months ago, talking to one of their parliamentary committees, because they were having to make the same decisions. How much rice should we grow? Okay, given that 18% of the rice is used to feed animals. We'll say, why opportunity cost? Water, labor, and so on, you know, to grow that rice doesn't make sense. Let's go and buy the rice from Vietnam to feed animals instead, and use that land and money to invest in other things. Yeah? So economic sense, very different altogether. So that's my kind of academic answer to your question. Others, okay, Manda? Yeah. This lady over here, please, yeah.
Thanks very much. My name is Manda. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Kranji Countryside Association. I'm also a Research Associate at NIE. My question is for both of you, actually. I'm glad that you debunked the myth that Singapore has no land for agriculture. We can surely increase the 0.7% to 1% of the land use for agriculture. We should also move away from thinking about land to thinking about space, because we've got lots of, I think, potential for developing space for agriculture. It doesn't just have to be land, so to speak. Now, my question is then about talent, because you can build, you can ring fence land for agriculture, you can have lots of money coming into the industry, but what about talent pool? As it stands, there is no agriculture degree in any university in Singapore. There is no agriculture diploma even in the polytechnics. Where are we going to find the people to run these farms? We don't even have unskilled agricultural labor. They all come from Bangladesh or India or China. So where are you going to find the people to then run these farms? This is a very, I think, a pressing problem from the industry perspective. Thanks.
There's one aquaculture diploma, Republic Poly.
Yes. Where do we even start?
Yes, I think the question about manpower, skilled manpower, people experience in agriculture, livestock farming, and so on. Singapore, there is a lack of it. Yeah. From our experience, I think Jack is here, from our experience in Sky Greens, it was very difficult for us to find horticulturists in Singapore, right? To work on our farms. Yeah. We had to bring in foreigners, actually, to help us, right? And this is something that we have in our polytechnics, schools that teach agriculture, farming, and so on. Temasek Polytechnic, Singapore Polytechnic. They also do a lot of aquaculture research and so on. But when they graduate, and you ask them to work on a farm, they come for 1 month and off they go. You see? So this is something that I do not know how we can solve, Yeah? So this is something that, again, we need to look into the curriculum within the polytechnics to actually train people who will work on a farm after they graduate. Yeah? And also, Actually, manpower is a problem not only in the farming industry, it's for all industries in Singapore, right? So we have always been appealing for more quota for foreign workers in our farms, which the government has never agreed to. So it's 1-for-1 for a long, long time. Yeah. So this is something which I think, in a way, AVA fills a bit of the gap, you know, because they have specialists within AVA who are able to help and advise the farmers on certain aspects of the farming, right? Especially in disease control and so on. So, but to employ someone to work on a farm, one with specialized knowledge to work on a farm, is not easy. However, I can see the day where our farms has expanded and has grown. Then the farm will be able to afford to bring in specialists to help us, scientists and specialists. It's again a matter of how much you want to pay, right? We look for people to work on our farms, and many people from overseas, they apply for the job, but we have to pay a hefty salary, which we ill afford, yeah? So this is some of the practical aspects. Yeah.
You know, I've been signaled by the host of this seminar that all good things must come to an end. And I think, shall we stop here then? Oh, one last question? Yes, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Ngiam and Dr. Teng. I'm Ray from MDW Consultancy. Just want to share a comment because I'm in real estate. And some of the international property consulting firms have investment staff here who are advising clients from Singapore overseas to invest in farms, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, of course in Europe. Right, so these kinds of farms can actually take on the form of vineyards, could be sheep farming, goat farming, etc. So then again, you know, from my perspective, if this kind of real estate investment can take form and shape in Singapore, then this is another aspect for real estate investors from other parts of the world or even in Singapore to also look into investing apart from the traditional or conventional office shop house investment, etc. So just want to enlighten some of us that indeed there is a real estate aspect to farming investment that could actually make Singapore property market investment a more exciting landscape. Thank you.
I think in the property market, you can invest in properties with 99 years lease, with freehold and so on. But in the farming sector, the lease at the current time is only 20 years. And investors are very reluctant to invest in such lands. Yeah? And when we go for loans from the bank, when the bank look at the lease and they say it's 20 years lease, they turn us down flat. They tell us this is non-bankable, right? So that is why we need to look in Singapore to extend the lease of the land for farming. Best is if it can be made permanent, 99 years. My goodness, there will be a REIT form to invest in farmland, right? So that is why I suggested that we develop a farmers cooperative in a way to own land, farmlands in Singapore. Yeah, thank you. I hope your investors can be persuaded to invest in our farmlands with shorter leases. Yeah.
Yeah, there's another, definitely last question from there.
Thank you very much. I'm Timothy Choon from representing Foodscape Gardens. We actually work with people who grow their own food as well. Yeah. This is more of a concern from the point of the consumer. You know, based on your based on what you foresee, Dr. Ngiam, what do you think is what are the measures that Singapore in the future, as a community, will take to keep with or rather to maintain the ethics of farming, whilst progressing in high technology? Maybe Dr. Paul Ting can comment on that as well.
So did you say ethics?
Yeah, the ethics of food and its produce. You know, in terms of biocides, you know, pesticides, chemical farming, and things like that. Like, what do you think? Or rather, what do you foresee as Singapore what sort of measures that Singapore will take in the future to maintain this while, you know, progressing rapidly with high technology farming? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think with intensive farming, there's always been concern, especially when you farm livestock, on animal welfare, right? So I did mention to you that our farm, Seng Choon farm, has followed the trend in Europe, whereby laying hens are caged in groups, so they call it enrichment pens, to take care of their welfare, right? And when Seng Choon expanded the farm, when they built new poultry houses, they adopted that system, because we are aware that there's a movement in America and in Europe that is going to put laws on animal welfare. And if you don't conform with their standards of animal welfare, you cannot export any of these products to Europe and to America. I know that they have already imposed a law for pig farming, whereby pregnant pigs cannot be put in gestation pens. They must be housed in a group to make them move around. Because in the current way of farming pigs, they are kept in gestation pens for the period of the pregnancy, or for gestation, which is 3 months and 3 weeks after mating. So many of them feel that this is cruel. And actually, the pigs should be kept in a group. And the European community has made laws for this. And by 2017, I believe, all their pig farms have to convert their gestation pens into group pens, right? So we are aware that such movement is on, and I agree that especially for livestock, then we should actually take care of the welfare of the animals while we produce them.
I think that's a good note to end on. Before Lisa comes up, you know, I think we've really been very privileged this afternoon to hear from Dr. Ngiam. You know, you're a national treasure. I think, yeah. And certainly thank you all for participating. I'm sure, you know, some of you want to stay behind and just network with each other and talk more, really, yeah. But I think we have to end the session, I'm afraid, yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ngiam and Dr. Teng, for your insights as well as the sharing. We would now like to invite the Executive Director of the Centre for Liveable Cities, Mr. Koo Teng Chai, to come on the stage and present the tokens of appreciation to the panelists, and for photo taking, please. Photo. We have now come to the end of the lecture for today. Thank you very much to the audience for sharing and asking questions. And we would like to thank you also if you could share your feedback on this lecture via email, which would help us to improve our lecture series. Have a good evening, and we hope to see you again.